Signs of Viking ancestry you shouldn't ignore. The Vikings have dominated legends and lore books. Most of these stories have been acted out in movies and documentaries. So rich is the history of these seafarers and Norse warriors that we are still unearthing many details of their lives. The Vikings were ferocious seafarers and invaders from Scandinavia. They existed mainly in the late 7th century AD, and their ships carried ruthless warriors to distant and nearby lands over the next 3 centuries. They raided, plundered, and took over the lands they came upon. These lands included Northern Europe and the British Isles. They even ranged as far as Northern Africa, the Mediterranean, the Middle East, Turkey, and Canada. There they lived as raiders, pirates, and traders. The Vikings founded living settlements and governments in these parts of the world and established themselves and their descendants as rulers and nobility. Considering how far and wide the Viking voyages took them, it is often said that we all carry a little Viking DNA in us. This is very true for most Europeans because the Viking Age started in earnest in England in June of 793, and they were never completely wiped out. Rather, there were defeated Vikings who integrated with the English and got assimilated into the population. Their quest for dominance resulted in the destruction of many buildings and places that the English considered holy. This is because the Vikings are considered heathens by the British and are of a pagan race. Likewise, the Vikings had no regard for the English faith or Christianity. The invasion continued into northern and eastern England and crushed many smaller Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. In the middle of the Viking era, they controlled a third of the British mainland, and their territory became known as the Danelaw. This invasion continued for another 80 years, and by then, the Vikings held many English kingdoms in their palms. The Viking Age in England came to an end around 1066, when King Harold Godwinson held off an invasion from Norway at the Battle of Stamford Bridge in Yorkshire. Even though this battle marked the end of the Vikings' powerful reign over England, it did not erase the indelible mark they left. 200 years of Viking occupation left behind many reminders in different forms, one of which is in many English ancestries. Other forms include language, culture, location names, and genetics. It is said that the primary reason for the Viking invasion and global expansion was a lack of mating opportunities. We can truly say that if mating was the primary objective, they succeeded in their goal. An ancestry map of Scandinavian DNA across Great Britain and Ireland shows a spread pattern of well-known events of the Viking invasion. There seems to be a high level of Scandinavian descendants in the northeast part of England, which reduces as it spreads outward away from that region. So it is safe to say that a lot of people existing today will have signs of Viking ancestry. And it is quite easy to check. If you suspect that you have some traces of Viking blood in your ancestry, you can check for any of the following. Family names. The easiest way to check if you have some long-lost Viking ancestry in your family is by checking your family name. The Vikings had a simple naming pattern. They used a system of patronymics to name and give their lineage to their children. Most of their names ended in son or sin, depending on the gender. If it's a boy, the name usually ends in son, and for girls, sin. These names have evolved with the passing of time, but we can still see them in English names such as Thompson, Jackson, and Watson. This naming pattern is still very much alive in some parts of Iceland, but time may have washed over its origin. The Vikings also like to name their children in reference to some personal characteristics, such as tall, short, low, wise, long, etc., which is where names like Godman and Flat originated from. Other Scandinavian names can come from their predecessors, so you can check your family name for these names, and it could mean that you have Viking ancestry somewhere in your history. However, these names may not necessarily mean that you once had a Viking in the family. People of various backgrounds can use names. Physical appearance. The Scandinavians have a characteristic body appearance. They are well-built, tall, with long flowing hair and beards, and have a well-set square jaw. Their eye color was mostly blue or green, and they had light-colored hair that was blonde or red. Due to the seafaring characteristics of the Vikings, their physical build evolved into a strong, lanky, and muscularly toned body. This characteristic became genetic and can be seen in their offspring and their offspring's offspring. You may have heard that someone is said to be built like a Viking. That means the person has the physical characteristics of a Scandinavian. You can check for these traits in yourself or your existing family members. Although this may not be a deciding factor, you may be surprised at what you will find within your ancestry. Hereditary problems. Despite their awe-striking physical appearances, the Vikings also had a couple of hereditary problems that they passed down to their descendants. A recent research finding from an archaeological dig at Viking latrine pits in Denmark found that these ferocious warriors suffered from very bad intestinal worm infestation. Further research shows that the Vikings' DNA adapted to this condition to protect them from the worm parasites, and this genetic adaptation can still be seen in their descendants currently alive. It is hard to say if this evolution is good or bad for the living Scandinavian descendants. According to a new study by the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, This protective gene can be very problematic, and those who inherit this worm inhibitor gene run a higher risk of emphysema. Emphysema is a lung disease. However, the ancient Vikings never lived long enough to experience this side effect. The Viking heritage can also be blamed for another health condition known as patron's contracture. This condition is found in only 2% of the world's population, and it is always present where there is a family history of it. It is common in men and linked to the rowing of longships. The rowing action puts a strain on the hand muscles, causing them to constrict with time. As you know, the Vikings are known for their prowess in rowing longships, which must be where they got this health condition from. Patron's contracture causes a progressive retraction of the fingers. The end result is a permanently clenched hand that can only be reversed through surgery. We can see this condition mainly in Northern Europe. The highest number of cases are found in Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Edinburgh. These are all places where the Vikings originally existed in greater numbers. The patron's contracture is one sign of Viking ancestry you shouldn't ignore. Most of these health issues that became hereditary were due to poor hygiene, poor nutrition, stress, and a lack of medical care. Remember that these were warriors who would come back with all sorts of injuries, most of which would not be properly treated. They would row and row for days without rest. It's not surprising that a physical condition arose due to the rowing stress. Cultural tradition. The Scandinavians are a tribe filled with cultural traditions. Their culture birthed some of the most exciting folklore we read today. The stories of Odin, Thor, Loki, Frida, and even Ragnar. These stories are handed down orally from generation to generation. Along with the stories are some rituals they conducted. We can still see some signs of these ritualistic attributes in our modern world. They are seen in the celebration of Norse holidays and participation in traditional Norse sports and crafts. All these are signs of Viking ancestry that were handed down until our turn. So if your family has maintained certain cultural practices or traditions that align with Viking customs, you may have traced your ancestry back to the Vikings. The Vikings were a fearsome bunch in their time and left a mark on history. It is important to know that most of these marks they left are positive and led to some of the civilizations we have today. Crazy, right? So if you want a better answer to the question of your ancestry, you can go for DNA testing to get a better guess if you have signs of Viking ancestry or not. You never know what you will find when you look. Genetic testing can give you a better idea of the percentage of your ancestry. You can use its results with other signs like physical appearance, geographical location, health factors, and culture to determine if you have an ancestor who is a Viking sometime in the past.